Hello, everyone. I am D&D Jordan Lee, and welcome to the very first AceCon. Yes, hopefully this will maybe become an annual thing. This is an event celebrating asexuality, what it means to be, our experiences, stories, and how we can lift each other up. During this con, we'll be sharing deeply personal topics. What is true for us may not be true for you. We want to keep this space safe and we'll be providing links to resources that you can utilize. Reminder, we are not therapists or psychologists, so we want you all, as well as this chat and this panel, to remain safe. So we encourage you to take a listen, as well as checking out the links that are currently being posted into chat at this time. So let's get to meeting our fantastic panelists. And I am going to jump over to Syrup.
I knew it. I knew it. Hi everybody. I am Syrup. I am one half of Waffles Maple Syrup. We do TTRPG things. That's part of why we're here. But me, myself, and I, my pronouns are she, her. I am exploring she, they. It is a in progress thing. You can find me GMing a Pathfinder 2e show, Outcast and Outclassed, on our channel, and all over the internet, like at Revica_syrup on Twitter. And listen, I'm everywhere. Just Google us; it'll be great. But in regards to this panel, identify as demisexual, biromantic. Um, we're also talking about neurodivergencies here. So I have ADHD. I have anxiety, plenty of it. And I think, yeah, that's kind of my expanse right now.
Sorry, y'all. I'm also neurospicy, so I'm also making sure we're all included in what's happening. So I'm copying and pasting real quick. We're
I
going to
switched
jump
tabs.
over
I was like, where am I?
to Josephine next.
Yeah. Hey everybody. I am Josephine. I use none she pronouns. You can find me at Scary Dog Friend on most things. I identify as aromantic, asexual, got autism, ADHD, and like almost every sleep disorder besides sleep apnea somehow. Um, yeah, and I have done previous work with asexual outreaches before as well, so this is a great marriage of being involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josephine. Next, we're jumping over to Eris.
Hi, I'm Eris Savad. My pronouns are she, her, and I am polyamorous pan gray ace. And I have undiagnosed, but definitely have autism and ADHD, and lots of anxiety. There's tons of anxiety here.
Thank you so much, Eris.
Oh
And
yeah,
we're going to,
sorry, I forgot to say what I do.
yes, go ahead.
I'm too anxious. I make I make things, whether it's TTRPG accessories that I sew. I make jewelry, and also I am one third of Gnome Brew, the brew crew, who talks tabletop shenanigans and whatever else comes up Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
Fantastic, Eris. Let's jump over to Rue.
Hello, I'm Rue. I use they, he, or z pronouns if you're feeling particularly spicy. You can find me on Twitter as at Ilana Knight 13 and everywhere else as just Ilana Knight without the 13. I'm a game designer, sensitivity reader and consultant, editor, and tabletop RPG performer. In terms of identifications, I identify as a demi, bi, ace, and romantic person. So demi arrow, demi ace, and then bi for both of those. That was a really hard sentence. And I have autism, ADHD, and anxiety and major depressive disorder.
Thank you so much, Rue. And then we're going to jump over to Jay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jay or Nala. I go by both. I use they, them pronouns, and I am on Twitter at Nala Woo. I am an illustrator and art director working full time in TTRPGs. Besides that, I do voice acting, sensitivity consulting, TTRPG, content creation, and actual play stream performance. For me, I am demisexual. I also so I got the holy trifecta of ADHD, depression, and anxiety. My anxiety is specifically general anxiety, possibly trauma-induced anxiety. I don't actually know. But that's pretty much it. I got some kind of chronic fatigue. I don't know. It's a mystery, and I have a auditory processing disorder as well.
Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing panelists. Please go and support them. I'm D&D Jordan Lee. I'm a content creator, the DM for Ampistrono D&D, which RoboGoblin made us all realize it's an entirely ace cast, so that's pretty cool to realize. I'm also the organizer for Games for Change, which you can go check out socials because I honestly want to get to talking to these amazing folks about the importance of asexuality and neurodivergencies. So, the question I am going to ask the panel right now is I think it's really important to define from the start what does being asexual and neurodivergent mean to you? I'm actually going to pop this over to. Uh, we're all going to be taking turns while we are chatting about this, about our own experiences. So do keep that in mind. Again, I'm going to constantly remind to please take a look at those resources because once again, we are not your therapists and our experiences may not be the same for you. But let's jump over to Eris first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess establishing definitions is a good place to start. For me, being asexual is being not motivated by the need to have sex. That is not a thing that I necessarily look for in a partner or anything that I look for as a need to fulfill myself. Uh, I think that there is a part of the spectrum of how much that you don't want the sex and how much you may want on occasion or in certain circumstances or something like that. That's why it is a spectrum, and I think that's really cool. For neurodivergency, I think that's also kind of the same varying spectrum in differences from the what everybody expects the normal human brain to process information in a certain way. Ours just don't do it in the same way. I think that's my definition, at least.
I think that's a very pointed definition, Eris, that kind of because if you think about it, being ace and being neurodivergent, we're at a crossroads when it comes to both of these topics, with kind of in the way that society is kind of seeing how romance is and processing things, whether it be learning or just functioning in the real world otherwise, and our own valid thoughts and experiences. We're at that kind of crossroads. I kind of feel like we're almost like the avatar of we've got little bits and pieces from both, but we don't necessarily fit into a specific mold when it comes into that. So it's the ability of jumping in between both of those. So I think you said that perfectly eloquently. I also realized I've totally forgot to say, hi, I'm Demi Bi and I have ADHD and I'm depressed and have anxiety. So hey, that's me. Hi. This is fine. This panel is going great. So to take it back though, Eris, I think that is the perfect kind of foundation when it comes to talking about both of those things, because especially since there is such a movement now in the last year or two, even with the importance of making people more valid in the fact that they are comfortable in their neurospiciness or in their aceness, regardless of where they are at. I think it's really important to kind of come up with that definition and make one for your own. So I'm curious to hear then, Jay, what your definition for basically neurodivergence and asexuality, what that means to you.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring up the idea of like intersections between those things, because for me, not only am I neurodivergent and asexual, I also, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm queer and I'm trans, non-binary, and I'm a person of color. And so all of these things converge together. And so today, when I speak about my experiences, that is the lens through which I'm speaking from. So I like saying that so that people have the context for literally everything else I'm about to say. For me, I didn't realize I was ace, specifically demisexual, which for those of you who don't know, that is where, at least for me, my self-definition is I have to have a pre-established relationship or friendship with someone before I want to have sex with them. Because I am a really sex positive, kinky person. That is who I am, and I'm very open about that. And the thing is, and I have like a really high sex drive too. Like I think that's definitely a stereotype of ace people, is that all ace people are sex repulsed or just like don't have sex at all. And while there are asexual people who for who that is the truth for them, that is not the truth for me. But simply for me, it's that I have to know someone predetermined, or not predetermined, what the heck, I have to just know someone before the sexual attraction is there. And so that means I have never understood throughout my entire life why people hook up with people. Like you message a stranger on a dating app and you can go have sex with them. And for me, like that just seems like a completely foreign thing to me, because I'm like, you don't know these people. Like that's a really like I see sex as an incredibly intimate act of love for someone. And I just never understood that. And, you know, like growing up as a teenager when everybody was crushing on all the boys, not only was I like queer and trans, but didn't know it at the time, but I also, with the demisexuality, I was like, y'all got crushes, huh? And I specifically remember like pretending to have crushes on people so I could like fit in with people. And I'm like, maybe I did actually have crushes on people, but it was like, people would be like, who do you like? And I'm like, names any boy, just like names a boy. And so it was like, you know, very much like that. And as far as my neurodivergencies, uh, me having ADHD and being neurodivergent affects literally everything in my life. And it wasn't until like, even now, I'm still discovering things about my ADHD that I didn't know before, because nobody studies ADHD, especially in adults, especially in people who aren't assigned male at birth. Like they don't care about adults with ADHD. So there's no studies about it. But I'm learning from other people who have ADHD and who talk about their experiences online that it affects literally everything, like social, mental, learning, everything. And so for me, I'm sure there is links between my neurodivergency and my aceness. But that's me.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. I was snapping over here. I know I was muted, but the whole aspect too of like, I agree with you completely of like people using dating apps and that being so strange to me, because
Mhm.
also my background too, I was also studying psychology and crime. So I'm like, listen, you don't know who this person could be. I need to like actually know them before kind of uh even meeting for a burger. I like, your food is sacred, listen. So like I feel that so much, and that is so valid, and I appreciate you speaking to that. So yes, totally agree with you when it comes to that, as well as neurodivergency. That I think it's, again, I think it's really great that steps are being made to explore that, and people are being more understanding of that. I think we all can agree 10 years ago that was never a conversation that came up at work. Oh, you're having, a foggy day or a high pain day or something like that. Most of the time you were told to suck it up, and some workspaces are still putting that. I'm happy to say it seems like it's moving away from that, but it seems like the boundaries are shifting and starting to become a little bit more jello versus those finite things, which being ace and being neurodivergent, we're kind of jello. We move around. We might be more ace this week than we are another week. It's fine. Or maybe since we're all TTRPG stuff, maybe we're a gelatinous cube. Would that work
We
better?
wiggle.
We wiggle. We wiggle.
It wiggles.
Amazing. Let's see. Let's jump over then to Rue.
Yeah. I'm gonna look at the question again because my brain stopped working. All
Oh,
right.
I will ask it again. What basically is your definition from your experience of being asexual and neurodivergent?
Yeah, so I'm both demi-romantic and demisexual, which means that for either sexual attraction or romantic attraction to happen for me, I have to know a person and know them quite well before that connection can be made. And something for me that I think a lot of people get confused about, because those exist under the ace and arrow umbrellas, is that I'm polyamorous and I actually have two spouses. I got married last October. And so lots of folks a lot of the time are like, but if you're arrow ace or under that umbrella, like, what do you mean you have spouses? What do you do with your
You
spouses?
should just be alone forever, right? You should just be alone forever.
Yeah, I should just sit alone in my basement all the time.
Just
and not
roommates.
just roommates.
Not
One of-
this.
one of my coworkers does refer to my spouses as my roommates, but that's a separate problem. But yeah, so like I think a lot of misconceptions around the ace spectrum and the arrow spectrum are that ace and arrow people don't have don't make those connections, and that's not always true. Some people do, of course, not have the desire for any romantic or sexual connection with folks. But I feel like a lot of the time, allo people like auto assume that we are not interested in any sort of like interpersonal connections, or that like we can't have relationships with other people. And so that's something that's always been sort of like a thorn in my side, I suppose. And identifying as ace for me like has been sort of a very fluid journey. I used to identify as like strictly arrow ace, and then realized a bit more about myself, and switched that to demi. And I think that it's important to like acknowledge that fluidity, because sexuality and romantic identity are fluid, and it's okay to like realize new things about yourself. And that's sort of the learning journey that I've been on for probably the last 10 years or so as a human. In terms of neurodivergence, I wanted to start with a statement similar to what Jay made about the fact that all of my experiences come from also a person who is mixed race and trans non-binary and physically disabled, on top of being queer and neurodivergent and arrow ace. And so the ways that I experience the world are also colored by those experiences. And growing up, I went to see a lot of doctors for my mental health. And I was told to my face by a doctor that I, quote unquote, this will be some weird medical terminology. I apologize. I exhibit autistic behaviors, but because I am a high functioning person, they're not going to put it on my medical record because it will affect my prospects. And so a lot of my life has been spent sort of like getting over that barrier that the medical system put between me and the community of like neurodivergent people that I'm a part of. And so like the wider distribution of that community through social media and online communities in the past 10 years or so has been huge for me, not only in like getting to learn more about autistic identity and ADHD and my neurodivergences, but also like learning coping mechanisms that I never had access to because I wasn't treated or like given the accommodations that someone with autism and ADHD deserves, because I was never properly diagnosed. And so I think those sorts of things are super important to me. And like neurodivergence is more than just a diagnosis. It's about a community, and it's about the like experiences that we all share and the ways that our minds work that are not wrong, but simply different from the way that people who are neurotypical work.
I completely agree with you, Rue. And I think you probably saw both Syrup and I were wincing at that. I'm so sorry that was an
My
experience.
just to vibe so hard with that, my
Yeah.
partner Waffles got told exactly that the other week when trying to find a adult autism diagnosis. It is, he has a bachelor's degree, so of course he can't be autistic, don't you know?
There's no way.
And
You're smart? No, you're not allowed to be smart or good at school.
No.
You have to be
Ugh.
disabled.
The anger I feel, because it's so limiting. Like my heart legitimately breaks
Yeah.
for anyone that has to experience that, but also like this is gonna sound really corny, but looking at all of you and kind of imagining like younger selves that have been told like, yo, like you you were a point off. We can't diagnose you or give you those resources that you desperately need because you're a point or two off. And in a way invalidating everything that we're experiencing and just being kind of told to kind of fall in line and go from there. And that's not right at
I
all.
I was really good at school when I was younger. I was a really advanced reader and I'm a really good test taker. So, of course, all of the accommodations that I could have gotten for my ADHD by the time I was in high school and was actually diagnosed wouldn't have been useful to me because I don't need extra time on tests. I need extra time for extended long term assignments, among other
Mm-hmm.
things. That's what I would have needed to succeed in high school.
But like whether it becomes goes towards neurodivergency or neurospiciness as we call it, or having those resources and that information, like think about it. When you had those conversations, whether it was in school or was with friends or otherwise, no one talked about being asexual or what it meant for that. It was very much, at least in my experience and only speaking to my experience, it was okay, well, yeah, no, I think they're hot and I'm gonna go and do a thing. And I was just very confused by it. So no, I very much appreciate you, Rue, to experience explaining those experiences. I'm sorry you had to deal with that and it's not okay. But we are working as a community, I think, to kind of all help each other out, which is really great. I'm gonna jump over to Josephine.
Yeah. So as far as like, I guess the question is even interesting and difficult for me to put into words or fathom. What does being asexual and neurodivergent mean to you? I think honestly, I still have no idea. And a lot of that will come from years and your entire life, really, of just like rewiring, like how to live, and like even even when like your friendships and like your romantic relationships or whatever, even when I've definitely had a lot of relationships where it was like both and neither at the same time. Um, and I had just recently one of those moments about the term alterous relationships, which is like, in my opinion, a better word than queer platonic relationships, where it's like it exceeds and transcends our current understandings of platonic and romantic relations, because it turns out we're all very complicated people, and things can all look and sound very different, even within a platonic or a romantic relationship. Um, so for me, it means that I'm still rewiring a bunch of stuff, and that I will still feel guilt and shame over certain, putting certain categories into putting certain relationships into certain categories, when for still me and other people, those like boxes are still very important. And I think especially with neurodivergency is over classifying stuff is also still just important, but also you feel bad about it because, well, quote unquote, you feel bad about it because are you supposed to complicate a relationship so much to the point that you have everything? Yes. The answer is yes. Because I mean, if a person needs those classifications, then take them. Get everything you can out of them. another aspect, rather than just social, I grew up as a sexually racialized person, so you know, a lot of people of color will experience being sexually categorized just by appearance alone. So being asexual and neurodivergent is almost everything that a sexually racialized person is never thought to be. So it's like, what, you don't have sex? What about you know, insert like Asian sexual weird stereotypes here? And what do you mean you're not good at certain things? You know, just growing up with that, even if it is very, you know, based in ignorance. When I was a child who was not told that people will just say random horrible things to you, I would be like, oh, I have to think about this, when you know, you don't have to give any terrible things like that any thought. But yeah, I think it for me, it means I don't have an answer, and that's pretty much the answer.
Josephine, you kind of hit the nail on the head of the other reason why I wanted to ask this question. I think it's important to establish a baseline, but it's also something that I've been struggling with too. Honestly, I've only been kind of discovering at least the like demi bi part of myself and even becoming more comfortable with admitting, hey, I have ADHD and I also have chronic pain and all this other stuff in the last couple years. And I think it's constantly a learning process when it comes to that because, again, we're still going against those kind of societal norms and those habits that we've been forming over the last however many years. So thank you very much, Josephine, for sharing that. And I'm going to jump over to Sierra.
There's been so much good said, and it's funny because as soon as you asked the question, Jordan, from like going from intros to asking this question, I was like, oh, I was hit by like, oh, this is what we're doing here tonight, and I'm already emotional and continuing to get emotional, so that's my disclaimer. But it is an incredibly important question. To talk about, you know, what else I bring to the table when answering this question, because I think it's also important. Like Rue was saying, I am a first generation American. I am Middle Eastern, and that has obviously colored my experience with being different. And additionally, I'm Jewish, and I went to a private Jewish day school for a long time as well. So just always feeling different is a big part of my answer. Instead of specifically defining each piece to it, I do kind of want to talk about it as a whole for me, because they do feed into each other in so many different ways. But especially growing up, especially you know, developmentally, being asexual, being neurodivergent has contributed to making me feel like I don't belong, because it's just part of it. And the fact that we can talk about it, the fact that we can define it, the fact that we can do this panel is amazing. I was at the, why am I so emotional? Hold on. Sorry. I was part of the asexual, I was attending, I wasn't part of it, the asexual panel at PAX Unplugged. It was so impactful and so amazing. Waffles called me out because I was listening to it and I was, oh, this is really good. And I was like, that's really great, but I'm not asexual though. I'm just demisexual. And he was like, you said that you are asexual. You just said you're demisexual. You are asexual. And I was like, oh, so even, you know, signing up for this panel, signing up for doing this and talking about this is something that I'm very much exploring still, because I always did identify as demisexual. But I felt like I still wasn't like, what it means to me is constantly changing. And I'm recognizing now that that is asexuality, that is a aspect of it, and that, you know, I did, on the other hand, have crushes all the time, like celebrity crushes. Like I would, but it was my ADHD, it was my hyper focus, it was what I would get into. And so even when I did crush, or even when I did have something like that, it was still looked at as unhealthy or something weird or something wrong. Sorry. And in that regard, like, I always still felt different. So it's like, oh, well, so if I do like something, I'm not doing it right. But if I don't like something, I'm doing it wrong as well. Like, where's the win? What am I doing and how am I doing it, basically? And even through college and through that experience, the one night stands and everything like that, I didn't get it. I still don't get it. It makes me severely uncomfortable. How
Yeah.
And that's not in a judgmental way. It's just kind of reiterating the fact that, like, I feel that so instinctually. I'm like, wait, I don't understand, but yet I still don't, like, I didn't feel like I could identify that way. So it is a constantly changing definition, to me, that falls under the umbrella of feeling, whether it's sexuality, whether it's how I process my neurodivergencies, whether it's how I interact with the world. Because I did forget to mention, Jordan, like you said, I deal with chronic pain. You know, every step of how I interact with the world is different.
No,
So that's kind of what it means to me.
thank you, Syrup. Also, do not apologize for getting emotional. We're probably going to get emotional during today's panel. I'm also, hyper sensitive, and so I cry at the drop of a hat. So your feelings are valid, and that is perfectly okay. But one of the things I'm getting, and I love everyone's answered. I love how different they are, but also they're so similar when it comes down to the base idea that it is this kind of exploration, regardless if it's our story or this is your story that you are exploring, it may not have that defined boundary that you were looking for when it comes to asexuality or for neurodivergence. And I think that is something that we all struggle to get comfortable with, especially when growing up, when you're trying to fit into those molds of trying to fit into a specific group, trying to fit in, or just trying to be yourself, regardless of whether that's amongst friends, yourself, or your family. And feeling like you're belonging and you're valid in those experiences can be really isolating sometimes. So it's no wonder, again, I was also at PAX U taking notes and tweeting about it for the thread. It was a very emotional panel. And it's because, a lot of us are involved in TTRPGs. We find that community, that sameness, that understanding and patience to explore those aspects of yourself that is so important throughout this entire journey. And I think it's going to be really important to keep in mind throughout this entire weekend. So I just want to say a quick thank you for all of those thoughts. Those are fantastic. I am going to just post a quick reminder before we move on to our next question, that again, we're discussing our own experiences and our own stories. We are not therapists or psychologists, so please use those resources that are popping up in chat. We want to make sure everybody is safe and educated on these topics. All right, everybody. I know we got a little heavy, which is fine, but we're going to move on to the next question, which is, so how did you know? What was your breakout moment when it came to finding out or figuring out, hey, you are on the ACE spectrum, or hey, you are neurodivergent? And I'm actually, if it's okay with you, Syrup, I understand if you want to take a minute too, that's totally valid. I'm going to start with you.
Thanks. I appreciate the check-in. So I talked about it like a little briefly already, but in regards to the asexuality, it was not. It started with a lack of understanding of others' behaviors, a feeling of, I see everybody doing this, so it's clear that's what's supposed to be done, but I don't like it, don't really want to do it, and have no interest in doing it the way everybody else is doing it. But I was at that point already very othered due to my neurodivergencies. I was not diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. That is something recent years. I think now it's been 2 years, which is exciting. So a lot of non-understanding. So now I recognize that was definitely the breakout moment, but I think at the time I umbrellaed it under I'm just different. I'm just not, well, maybe it's because I've always been an outcast. So I thought it was a lack of self-confidence, honestly. I thought that I just I don't like my own body enough. That's why I'm just not confident. As opposed to, learning as an adult, that I am confident in my body, and I am, when I do have a connection with somebody and I feel like I can have a foundation of trust between the two of us, I'm engaged and willing and excited and happy to do, that with that person. It's because, oh, maybe it's something else. So it took a while, but that was definitely the foundation of it. And then in terms of neurodivergencies, funny enough, I did get extra time in high school for math. And I have to give so much kudos to Katiosaurus for tweeting about this the other day. It was a new term, and of course, I'm already forgetting it.
Dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia. Thank you. I didn't know that was a thing until a week ago, y'all. And then I was like, oh, okay. That makes so much sense now. But so in high school, that should have been my first sign. And then when the credit goes to Waffles, my partner, for the real breakout moment of, building a life for myself and a space for myself, and entering the TTRPG community, actually, very specifically, to make me realize, like, oh, I have a space here that is comfortable to be myself and to learn myself, because I feel like you can't really explore yourself until you're in a space where you feel safe enough to do so.
Yes.
And that was the TTRPG space for me. And so when we made WMS, like, at its core, it's always been about the fact that it has significantly helped both Waffles and myself in our own mental health journeys. And it's the reason that I was able to get diagnosed, the reason I was able to realize, like, oh, ADHD is not just like hyperactivity. Oh, wouldn't you know? It's much more than that. It is, I process the world differently, and you're telling me that other people are like this too, and that I'm not broken, and that it's a thing. Let me look into that. and that's how I got here.
No, gosh, I was again snapping fingers because same. I did not. I was allowed extra time, not through an official diagnosis when I was younger. I was off by a point. I was off by a single point, and the person that I was seeing didn't think that it would be enough to do it. My school, however, disagreed. So I was lucky enough that I had someone at the school that advocated for me. So that way I would have extra time, as well as, the little cheat sheet, little card you could bring in just to remind yourself for specifically math and Spanish, just learning those conjugations and how to use those different things. So totally, gosh, I had like goosebumps, Syrup. I wish you could have seen it. Like, I was like, oh my
Well,
gosh, that's my experience.
Jordan, you and I, we've talked before. We know we're very,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
very similar.
But the same too. I didn't really start to really explore it until honestly this Panini press, which is kind of, I think, forced many of us to kind of learn a little bit more about ourselves, since we've been kind of forced into that isolation even more so. And for many of us, just being more comfortable with speaking out about it. So, it wasn't until that and kind of going through some therapy sessions and then getting the diagnosis that, yeah, oh, okay, everything makes sense. I'm not as bad off as I thought I was. Yay, kind of thing. I can have those resources. And totally relatable with that. So thank you so much for sharing that experience, Syrup. I am going to jump over to Josephine.
Yeah, speaking of the Panini Press, the pandemic. So thankfully I've had the language for being AROA since I was 13. Like, I feel like I had a lot of when mentorship works, But being neurodivergent and like coming to terms with being autistic, literally, I remember talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, "Hey," I even thinking about it is so funny. Hey, sometimes when I put stickers on my face, I get upset, and they're like, "That's autism," and I was like, "Okay." Um, and what's the word? And like that, this was all during COVID when all of these thoughts of self-exploration that you're just tabling because you're literally too busy to think about it. I'm just like, I have all the time in the world now. So the sexuality aspect of it came pretty fast, but the many contexts that make being aroace or like those identities even separate uh can be very interesting when you also have like the social race aspect, the neurodivergence, uh and there's a lot of overlap between asexuality and neurodivergence as well, and certain more experimental relationship structures. It makes you realize that thinking about yourself as like a whole and not just like parts, is really conducive and really helpful when placing kind of like, I guess, eventually thinking less about why you're asexual and more just like there's lots of things that make you special, or there's lots of things that can come together in a really beautiful kind of harmonious way, and not thinking of those as deficits rather than things that there should be accommodation for as a standard. So the
I-
COVID the COVID did it.
Yeah. The COVID did it. Yeah. No, I agree with you completely, Josephine. And something that really resonated with me that you said was seeing as a whole. Because I think so often when it comes to either one of these, almost, and again, it's more of a societal thing, you kind of see yourself as kind of broken in some way, shape, or form because you're not living up to those expectations or you're needing that extra assistance. When at the end of the day, it's perfectly okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to actually need those resources. Life is hard. So take all the help you can get when it comes to being more comfortable with yourself moving forward. I think many of us too, since we are in the TTRPG space, honestly, the image and again, hi, ADHD, so images pop into my brain randomly of the kind of stat block we use when it comes to whether it be Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or whatever, and seeing all those not as necessarily the flaw on our character sheets, but something that can be used instead for inspiration. It makes us different, but it makes us even more unique and interesting. It's something that we should be talking about and talking about in a good way because hey, we can see the world in an even more beautiful light, just a little bit more different, which I think is very apropos. So thank you so much. I'm going to jump over to Eris. So to repeat the question, so how did you know? What was your breakout moment when it comes to neurodivergency and or realizing your aceness when it comes to this?
So I definitely a bit more of a late bloomer. I I grew up very much I'm a very big romantic. I love being in love. I love love. I love kissing. I love hugging. I love physical affection. And because I love all of this stuff, and I grew up, with the Disney princesses who always had boyfriends, and there was always a love interest and fairy tales and all that stuff. I, didn't even like it struck me as a teenager that I was probably bisexual because I didn't have any other term for it. And like I had crushes on my girlfriends. Like I was like, man, she's really pretty. Like, okay, I'm not completely completely straight. And then I was a very good learner. And society told me that I was supposed to grow up and I was supposed to marry a guy and I was supposed to have a lot of little children running around. And so I started down that road and because life is what it is, um I did rather well in school, and I never really caused any trouble. I was a good student. I was very patient, and I paid attention. So no one ever really looked twice at me, especially because I was great at math. I was doing pre-algebra. I was getting into geometry in fourth grade. Like, I was really good at math. And no one ever said, "Hey, you're a little too good at math." Um, no one ever did that. No one was like, "Hey, maybe we should like give this kid a test." Because one, my family was poor. And then as a teenager, I was orphaned. So I was paid even less attention to me. And I kind of just grew up doing the things that everyone around me was doing. I became a parent as a teenager, and I then finally moved up in the world enough that I could start going to therapy to go through some of the traumas and all the things that have been building up my whole life. And while I was doing that, I had a phenomenal therapist. She was wonderful. Not only did she she didn't diagnose me with anything other than general depression, because she was like, "Look, you have to pay for all of these tests. And I know you can't pay for all of these tests. So instead of recommending these tests to you, I'm going to recommend you read these articles and, start examining why it is you do the things that you do. Like those habits of, I have to check the front door every time before I go to lay down. Like, even if I just checked it, if I can't remember if the door is locked, I have to go check it again. Like, I can't not. Um, so I started like really examining why it is I was doing literally every single habit I had. And I started cutting out the habits that weren't serving me. And as I was going through all of my habits, and like, why am I having sex? I don't really want it. I don't get anything from it. Like, no. Like, and then just every once in a while, I'd come up with another thing, and I'm like, "Oh no, that was definitely autistic habit. Oh god, what are we doing here?" So yeah, it's just been like self-researched, and as people like us share our experiences, I'm like, "Man, I really relate to that a lot. Oh my gosh, man, that sounds just like me growing up." And then I'm like, "Okay, maybe I should just research this a little bit more." And while it's really hard to find clinical studies on a lot of the things that I'm running into and a lot of the questions that I have, I found groups of people like the one before you that are willing to talk about their experiences, especially such private experiences, that it was so helpful. Yeah, like shaking helpful. Like, it
Yeah.
feels good to
Yeah.
talk about, and it feels good to see that other people feel very much the same way as me.
I and thank you, Eris, for sharing your experience. I resonate actually with what you were saying about instead of math, it was books. For me, my kind of
Yes.
warning sign was the fact that I could read like 6 or 7 books at the same time and keep the story plots perfectly in line. But then when it came to math, I can't keep that together. Absolutely not. No. I will combine everything together or it doesn't mean anything, so why should I care kind of thing.
I
I need
breathe books.
context.
Honestly,
Um
I'm really glad that I was good at math because I use it all the time. I use it all the time.
One thing that also resonated with me though, when you were speaking to this experience as well, Eris, was the fact that when it was, um, sorry, words just like gave up. When it was helping you, when you were going through those experiences, when it was a good thing, that's when a lot of folks were, it seemed like, at least from my understanding of it, and at least my own experience with it as well, people would praise you for it. You're the overachiever when it comes to that. But then as soon as it becomes a problem, everything dries up in terms of resources and okay, now you're a failure, and the constant comparisons pop up when it comes to that, and not knowing exactly at the time of where to look for those resources. So again, just that little note just really resonated with me, Eris. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm gonna jump. Oh, syrup. Yes.
Just the smallest comment. I'm so
No, go
sorry.
for it.
I think to what you're saying, Jordan, very, very, very specifically, is something that this community has kind of all really resonated with, at least from my experience. And so, RS is like to what you were saying as well, specifically, like, that people are willing to talk about very personal experiences here. And I think it all comes from the fact that, like, we're all taking that stance for a moment and realizing, like, no, I suffered and other people should not have to suffer alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thread that I've just seen so much here in this community, and I just needed to bring that
No,
up.
I'm glad you vocalized that, Syrup. I very much appreciate that. And I think I agree with that immensely as well. So that's why I think we're having these open conversations because, hi, many of us need to really know each other. And for some of us, we just met in the Zoom call like a half hour before. So I'm going to jump over to Rue and repeating the question. So, how did you know? What was your breakout moment when it came to realizing you were ACE or your neurodivergency?
So kind of to echo what Josephine said earlier, I had the words and the terminology around Arrow Ace identity pretty young. I kind of grew up on Tumblr, and there was a lot more resources for Ace and Arrow identity on Tumblr than anywhere else that I had access to at the time. And so I had the fortune of having those sorts of resources available to me and to be able to read like Tumblr posts of like, hey, does this sound like you? And then sitting there like, I'm in this picture and I don't like it meme. Quite often, like at like 13 or 14. And like for me, it was actually harder to get other people to accept my identity than it was for me to figure myself out. No matter how much like explaining I did to people, especially growing up when I was in high school, they never really quite understood that I was at the time identifying as Ace. Now I identify as Demi, which is still under the Ace umbrella, but different shifts and whatnot. And due to some stuff that I won't go into detail about, I used to be very sex repulsed. I have gone to a lot of therapy and now am sex positive with my partners and like enjoy exploring those sorts of things. But having people like say to me to my face, like, well, you must not really love your girlfriend then if you don't want to sleep with her. And those sorts of things kind of like really alienated me a lot. And so for me, it was less of getting other people, like getting myself to understand who I was, and more getting everyone around me to understand, like, no, this is my identity. It's who I am and it's how it's going to be. And if you can't sort of put up with that, then we're going to go our separate ways, essentially. Um, and like, I think like the transition between that and like identifying as Demi for me was just a lot of like, oh, wow, sorry, my mouth stopped making functional sounds there. Whew.
That's a mood. That's a mood. We're gonna
So
embrace
relatable.
it. That's where we are.
um, the like self discovery and like finding out the things that like you like, and especially like for those of us who grew up with maybe not the best of childhoods, who have a lot of trauma to unpack, unpacking the coping mechanisms or the habits that you have that are not actually a part of your identity, they're just something that you've built up to keep yourself functioning the way that society expects you to, and sort of like really examining those things about myself and being like, oh no, I don't have to feel like that. I can let myself be who I am, was sort of like a really big part of that for me. For neurodivergence, I mentioned already my very exciting hospital experience. I also grew up poor and we didn't have health insurance for a lot of my childhood. So the chances of me getting diagnosed, even if they would agree to diagnose AFAB children, was very low. Um, but I was very good at certain kinds of math, I have aphantasia, which is the inability to see things in my head. And so algebra and those sorts of maths I was quite good at. And then we got to geometry and calculus, and I did horribly, absolutely horrible, because I couldn't see the like shapes in my head. And there would be whole questions that were like, imagine a cube. And I would sit there and I was like, I can't. And I would go to talk to my teachers and I'd be like, I can't imagine a cube. Like, and they would be like, well, you're not trying hard enough. And I happened to have the same teacher for pre-algebra as I had for geometry. And so she was like, you were such a good student in my other class, and I can tell you've given up on this topic. And I was like, no, I just can't see the pictures in my head. I'm not capable of it. And so like that was sort of for me the first indication that I was like neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form. I didn't get like the external validation of understanding that I was autistic and had ADHD until I was an adult. But like I had known since I was in essentially the 8th grade that there was something about my brain that did not work in the way that society wanted it to. And like uh for me it's a lot of like looking back now at like a lot of folks have said, like looking back at uh the fact that I have to keep 3 calendars to remind myself of appointments, the fact that I tweeted about it earlier this week, I washed the same load of laundry 3 times because I kept forgetting to move it from the washing machine to the dryer. And like all of these little things that I was like, wow, like these things that for me, now that I know that I have autism and ADHD, are just a part of that like identity and a part of the life that I am now like accommodating for myself, made huge problems for me in high school and college because I wasn't having them accommodated and there was no way for me to like articulate that to myself. And so for me, I think a lot of coming into my identity as someone with autism and ADHD is like forgiving myself for being a failure. Because I'm not a failure and I'm not broken. Society just decided that the way my brain works is wrong. That's not correct. The way that my brain works is the way that my brain works, and it should be okay. And so a huge part of like coming into my own for this has been like forgiving myself and Syrup, I'm also Jewish, and like forgiveness and um like recompense and those sort of things are really important in our faith and culture. And so like getting to sit down with myself on Yom Kippur and be like, you've hurt yourself and you need to apologize to yourself for what you said to yourself for being neurodivergent, has been super real like really important for me and really helped in my healing. Now it's my turn to
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, my heart.
Yeah. It's not an easy road at all, and it's still ever growing. And I actually would further challenge something that you said, Rue, with the fact that, brokenness and society, it's society that's broken and their ideals and the fact of how
yeah.
everybody functions. So I like clapping, Salem even agreed, he jumped up. So,
Kitty,
um
kitty.
kitty kitty kitty. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rue. I'm gonna jump over to Jay.
I've been making notes this whole time because I will talk forever. We love ADHD, so this will hopefully
Yeah.
keep things concise. But I wanted to start off just by saying, like, just to validate my fellow panelists, but also people in the chat or audience or people who are watching this after the fact who might feel very emotional. I think like I've done so many panels like this, and so like I know how this feels to finally sit down and talk with people that just get it. And it's so nice, especially if you never had friends who were like you growing up. Like even if you had friends, if your friends weren't like you, it can feel incredibly isolating. And I just want to say that I feel all of your emotion and I support you and everyone else, and that this means a lot for a reason. Especially for people in chat who might not relate but are here anyways. Thank you for being here. But you see all of us connecting over all of these things because, you know, asexuality is a marginalized identity. And when people who identify the same can finally talk about it together, that means a lot to us. So I guess this is just me saying, like, thank you for giving us this space to be together and for coming and listening and for talking with me. So that all being said, let me answer almost swore. Let me answer the question. So gonna just, if you don't mind, just gonna read off my notes.
I will read it again. How about that for a refresher? So
Okay.
for you, what was your breakout moment? The moment you kind of realized, you know, that you were ace as well as your neurodivergency.
Yes. So as I stated earlier, I have a bunch of neurodivergencies, but as far as asexuality goes, I did not know that was a thing until middle school. Similar to Rue, I joined Tumblr, and that's where I learned about a lot of queer identities for the first time. I wasn't necessarily sheltered as a kid. It's just that I had no queer people in my life. Like my mom had a boss who had a wife, like two women, but that was it. That was like the only exposure to queer people growing up for me. So I didn't know anything really about it, and I have found messages that I've posted online on the internet in my earliest days that were incredibly transphobic, because I didn't know any better. But you know, Tumblr was where I learned about all of these identities for the first time. However, the definition that I first saw for asexuality was extremely limiting because it was defined as, quote, a person that does not experience sexual attraction. And then, you know, that furthered into like, oh, ace people don't have sex. And I kind of just shrugged and was like, ew, sex, because I was like 12. And I didn't think much more about it after that because I was 12. And I don't actually remember when I started identifying as demisexual because I've come out so many times in my life that like each time I come out, it gets less and less interesting. It's like, oh, you again. Like, we know you're queer. Like, what are you doing here? Like, because I realized I was queer freshman year of high school when I developed a crush on one of my friends. So that was my first time coming out, was I am not straight. At the time I was identifying as bisexual. Now I just identify as queer because I feel like that term just fits me better. And then like the second time I came out, it was as trans non-binary. And that was like the second big one because that, you know, when I transitioned socially, I had a new name, new pronouns, all of that. Like that was a big thing. And then like after that, you know, I quietly, you know, at some point, you know, I'm now queer. I'm now like, you know, instead of being gender fluid, now I identify as agender, but I'm gender fluid presenting. Like all of these like little things, like I don't even bother coming out anymore. And so at some point in this mess, I started identifying as demi, but I don't remember when that was. My depression, I was diagnosed by my therapist my freshman year of high school as well. And anxiety, my general anxiety was diagnosed again by a different therapist. That doesn't really matter. But anyways, diagnosed in college. I'm not going to go into like super a lot of details, but I survived a terrorist attack when I was younger, and specifically the Boston Marathon bombing. And that has resulted in a lot of like anxieties about like loud sounds, and I have a really bad startle response, and I can't do crowds. So like when you see me at conventions, I am managing. So that's like the sort of anxiety thing. And then as far as my ADHD, I was diagnosed again in high school, and I say again because I remember taking a test or something in elementary school because I was both inattentive and hyperactive, because I do the whole like leg bounce thing and I could not sit still in school. So I remember taking a test and then nothing happened from that. They gave me one of those like seat cushions that you can put on top of your chair that let you kind of like wiggle around in your seat. Like it's like that's what they did for me, but they didn't do anything else. And and then once I got diagnosed again in high school for real this time, I still didn't get any accommodations, like I said earlier, because I didn't need any of the things that they thought I needed. Because I remember my parents being like, do you want accommodations? And they told me, whatever. And I was like, I don't need more time on tests because I do pretty well on tests. Like, my issue is remembering to pack my homework in my backpack and remembering to like eat lunch and like all of these things. So like it was just And there were earlier signs that I was neurodivergent. As a baby and toddler, I had a really hard time regulating my emotions, which nobody tells you that's ADHD. But when I was a baby and toddler, I would throw temper tantrums. Whenever anything went vaguely not my way, I would scream and cry about it because I did not know how to regulate that. I also had to go to speech therapy when I was younger because I was not talking. Like, I was not talking at the age that babies are supposed to start talking. So I had to have speech therapy. And then in elementary school, I was bullied for being weird. But like looking back as an adult now, like the weird that my peers hated so much was my undiagnosed ADHD that manifested in all of these neurodivergent behaviors that my peers made fun of because kids are just mean. And it's like, it's all of those things that, all the signs were there, but people don't understand ADHD. And so I did not get the help I needed until college, when I was finally able to figure out what accommodations I needed and was able to advocate for myself to my professors and say, I need more time for things. And, I need to sit in the front of the classroom so that I can stare at your lips when you're talking so I can understand what you're saying, because otherwise it's going to go in one ear, out the other ear. At the end of every class, I would stay after class and just go over the homework again. And they were always like kind of weird. Like some of them were more patient than others because they were like, I just said this at the end of class, but I'm like, no, I need you to sit down with me and tell me what the homework is again so I can write it down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's pretty much me. I'm very, very grateful that I was getting medical support when I was younger. That's definitely something that I appreciate, even though it didn't result in much until later. I appreciate that because I can't imagine what it would have been like if I didn't know anything like at all until college. So I'm definitely really grateful for that. But that's me. And I think the only other thing I'll add is that, like, something I discovered, because I'm not medicated for anything. I don't take meds. I have ADHD medication, but the side effects are like kind of yucky. So I don't really like doing it. But I self-medicate with caffeine, specifically drinking my coffee. Sorry,
That was tell me you're neurodivergent without telling me you're neurodivergent. That
my
was-
coffee.
that
I made coffee before this panel.
Oh my god.
Kitchen. Okay, anyway, I self-medicate with coffee.
That was so good.
I
that.
love it. I love and
Oh,
appreciate you
please.
so much.
Oh my god.
I love you can see like the neurons just firing off as the realization
I've
of
used my
my
brain cell. My brain cell. It's gonna be cold. The
Oh my-
people's whose house I'm staying at, they have a really fancy espresso machine, so it's the kind of coffee that has the
Oh.
foamed milk on top.
Oh, go get it, go get it. No, that's so valid. And Jay, thank you so much for sharing those experiences. I think we're all messaging you in chat that our hearts
Oh,
are
I
with
wasn't
you
even
for
seeing.
oh, that's fine. That our hearts are with you through those experiences. God, I'm sorry. One thing that I think really all of us have found our way and are finding our way still throughout this entire experience. Some of us have known for a long time, some of us are still finding out. For me, I kind of had a similar experience. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I was almost diagnosed. I had someone at the school that I was at that was a huge advocate that gave me some of those accommodations to help me out, which was massively helpful. But I didn't realize really, and this is the danger. So I went to college and I was a psych major. And honestly, the teachers would joke right around midterms when psych majors were learning about the different disorders and things like that. Oftentimes, you will self-diagnose, or you'll diagnose the people in your life. Don't do that. That's a problem. So don't do that. And I remember we were studying for some finals, and or not even finals, it was midterms. And we had one of those cards. Think of like if you've seen Grey's Anatomy when they're going through, I
Yeah.
have pain in my side and this. And my card was ADHD. And I'm like, as I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, wait, I do. Oh, wait, I do. No, because because, and again, and we're going to get into the discussion about this after our break. But also just the representation of someone with ADHD completely different from where I was seeing myself. So that did obviously push the, hey, maybe I should actually go and kind of take a look into, do I have ADHD and anxiety? Do I have to check the door 3 times before I go to sleep? Might be some things I need to look into. But yeah, no, go to a professional. Don't go on WebMD and try to do that. It's horrifying. Don't do it. For me, when it
Well,
came or any of those, just go to a professional and
I
go
was
to
gonna say
multiple if you need to. Like,
if you go on WebMD, they're gonna make you panic and think you have cancer. Like literally, it's like
don't do it.
don't look on there.
Don't do it. For me, when it comes to the whole experience with sexuality, I grew up in a very straight home when it came to that. However, I did have like a couple of cousins that were very openly gay, and luckily the family I grew up in was very supportive. But I never really saw that for me. And actually, I forget which anime it was, but I remember I was crushing on both of the main characters, the girl and the boy, and I was like, yes. And I liked learning about their relationship because it was very much the I don't know you, I don't know you. And they slowly became friends. And then slowly they started to become something more. To me, that made sense. Absolutely. Yes. Versus how it often is portrayed in books or other things. So for me, that was kind of my experience as well as in TTRPGs, kind of playing a character that um, sorry, I just saw that my coffee clip just popped up into chat. So kind of experiencing that and realizing that, okay, my experience is I'm not strange, I'm not different, or an outcast. There are other folks that are in this space and in many spaces out there that feel the same way, and it's valid.
Something I
So
discovered
that
because
was
I'm not
amazing.
medicated
Um,
for anything.
we are going to
I
take
don't
a
take
quick
meds.
10-minute break.
I
Oh,
have
yes, go on,
ADHD
Super
Zero.
quick,
Yeah,
sorry.
medication,
go.
but the side
Trick, by the
effects
way, I
are
picked
like
up
kind of yucky.
at PAX U
So
panels
I don't
is
really
I
like doing
touch my
it.
nose
But
to
I
keep a thought
self-medicate with
inside my head.
caffeine. I
It
go like
really
this.
works. Yeah. I just want to verbalize for VOD watchers as well a comment from my partner in chat that I did absolutely want to bring up. We did mention, not going to WebMD and things like that, and to go to a professional. But I think it's equally important to say that not everyone can go to a professional, and there is a very long list of also reasons that even going to a professional does not work out the correct way that it should, due to the medical system being
Racist.
lots of to name one to name one. And so given all of that, especially and just kind of having gone through it recently with Waffles and autism, as well as a lot of other things, there is in the community a acceptance absolutely of self-diagnosis. So I don't ever feel like just because you're not able to get a diagnosis and you are diagnosed that you are any less valid than someone that has an official
Yes.
diagnosis.
No, I appreciate that, Syrup, and I'm glad you stopped me before we went to break to say that. No, I think that's completely valid. And two, I think to add on to that too, since we've been talking about fluidity and how it can change constantly, don't be afraid to try that kind of, hey, I'm gonna be more this week, this next week, depending on how you're feeling. How you're feeling is valid. Your experiences are valid. I'm gonna again just say our little reminder that we're discussing our own experiences, journeys, and identities with regard to being asexual and neurodivergent. None of us here are psychologists or therapists, so please make sure to use the proper resources which are being posted into the chat. And we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. We're not even halfway through the questions because there's just so much to talk about, and I'm okay with this. But we're going to take a quick break, get up, stretch, move around, and we'll see you back here shortly.
I'm gonna go get my coffee.
Get your coffee. Come back. We have coffee. Don't worry. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm D&D Jordan Lee, joined by this phenomenal panel of incredible creators in this space as we are talking about asexuality and being neurospicy, aka neurodivergent. And we're going to jump into our next question. But before we do, again, I'm going to say this reminder. You're going to get sick of it, but it's valid. We're speaking to our own experiences and our own stories. What may be true for us may not be true for you. We are not your therapists or your psychologists. Please use those resources that are popping up somewhere. I don't know which direction chat's in. One of the directions that chat is in now. Well, sure. So we are going to jump to our next question, which is, what are some of the problems we face being neurodivergent and asexual, and how can they be fixed? And first on the conveyor belt of asexuality and neurodivergence is Rue. You were not expecting that. I'm here for it.
Sorry.
You will never get me to spit take. I've come so close on so many streams, but it's never happened.
I was about to say that feels like a targeted attack on Jay there.
I don't know who's out to get me, but I know people are out to get me because I've said I've never done a spit take on a stream before. I've come real close though. Someday.
Well, I just love to. I was starting to say something like, well, I'm here, so we're going with it. So where are we going?
Okay, sorry about that, but I had to giggle for a hot minute there.
Do not apologize.
One of the problems that I want to talk about is something that Josephine mentioned earlier, which is that especially for those of us who are BIPOC, who are non-white, so much of Western culture and white culture is about fetishization for us, and the aspects of our cultures that white people find sexy, and like how we are reduced to those hypersexualized caricatures in the minds and media of white people. And I think that's like because I'm mixed, indigenous, white, and Romani, and like Romani people in particular are very hypersexualized. Essentially, there are no Romani people in media that are not sex objects or witches. Those are our two the two things we can be. And so like for me, like I have never been able to see myself in ace like representation because it's kind of similar to trans representation where if there is an ace character in media, they are either a robot or some sort of non-human creature, or they are a thin white person in a beanie with dyed hair. Uh, and it's sort of
look,
like
it's me.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, you just described Eris.
Talking about attacking people in today's panel. My
Yikes.
God.
We're taking shots, taking names.
You know what? It's okay. I claim it. This is me.
I want you to know that I was not like looking at you or thinking about you in any way. I was just kind of imagining the vague, like, because I don't see things in my head, like just like the vague outline of a cartoon character. I'm so sorry. Oh,
Look, no, I you know what? As a person who is most of the time one of the few white people in the room in my like home life and stuff like that, I would like to see more people who look like my extended family in represented in media. I am tired of looking like every single main character heroine in almost every media that I see, whatever, or love interest, whatever. I want that too. I want that too.
Thank you. But yeah, so like I would love it if as a whole, Western culture would just stop fetishizing people of color. So that those of us who are ace and neurodivergent can like exist in ourselves without white people being like, no, you can't be ace. If you're ace, I can't fetishize you. Which is just a horrible life to live for all of us. And the other thing that I want to touch on is specifically about both being neurodivergent and arrow ace, which is that neurodivergent people like experience the same. I almost said suffer, and then I beat myself in the brain for saying that.
Good fixing it. Good fixing it. Yes.
We experience the same infantilization that disabled people do because it's a personal like whether or not as a neurodivergent person we identify as disabled. I am both neurodivergent and physically disabled, so I sort of let it all wrap up into one identity. But so often neurodivergent and disabled folks are infantilized and considered like not asexual in an identity way, but asexual in a like no one wants to have sex with that person or no one wants to be with that person because of who they are and their life experience. And so a lot of the time, like being an arrow ace neurodivergent person, it's like, oh, well, yeah, of course you are, because, you know, I can't see you as a sexual object because you're disabled, because you have a cane, because you use a wheelchair, or because you're autistic. And so many people think of autism as like, because of the words that we've used to describe it in the past, like, oh, you are mentally younger than you actually are, which is not true of any like condition. You are the age mentally that you are physically. You are just experiencing the world in a different way than neurotypical people of that age experience the world. And so like I think a lot of the time we suffer from, and like ace people and arrow ace people also suffer from infantilization because there's this assumption that arrow ace people are younger or people only identify as ace when they're children, or like when what Jay was talking about, like when you're 12 and you don't really think about sex anyway. And so I think a huge problem that we face both as neurodiverse and as arrow ace people is that we are like largely infantilized. And I think the key to fixing that, like the key to fixing most things, is just education and people listening to us and like learning from our lived experiences. And it's why conversations like this, where we all open up about those things, are so important, not only for all of us to share and like be in community with each other, but also educationally for other people to come and look back at and be like, oh, I haven't realized that I've been treating my neurodivergent friends like that. Maybe I should re-examine those.
Thank you, Rue. No, I completely agree with you. One thing that really resonated with me that you were talking about specifically was kind of that, and I feel like this was an underlying thing that I picked up on, at least, was the grace to kind of have that understanding and patience with yourself when it comes to identifying with that, because unfortunately we live in a world that is still highly has just such a bad stigma when it comes to either one of these, unfortunately. And there's nothing like there's a lot of things wrong with that image of seeing it wrong in as a stigma. But being ace, being neurodivergent, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, when it comes to that. So I completely agree with you, and I think too, and I'm starting to see more of a grace and a understanding when it comes to you know, people talking about their experiences when it comes to asexuality, but also neurodivergency, but also having that grace for both physical and those mental differences, however that may be. There does not need to be a certain amount of criteria in order to be more or less of something. You are this. That is who you are, and that is okay. That is valid. So that was something that just really resonated with me that you were speaking about, Rue. So thank you so much for speaking to that. I'm going to jump over to Eris since you were clearly targeting Eris earlier. And from our anxious peeps, I'm doing this with so much love and respect. Camera is like, I'm canceling you. So
all of the love for no hard feelings whatsoever. I know that I look like a very stereotypical white queer person, and I have made peace with that. There's other than letting my hair grow out, there's not really much I can do. um, you okay, Jordan?
You're the long-haired white queer type, right?
Yeah.
The beanie and dyed hair.
No, I think there's a couple things. Like I think it all comes down to like decolonizing our mindset, because a lot of the issues that we're running into, being neurodivergent and being queer, being ace, all of these other intersections of marginalization, really come down to the core problem of being in that white supremacist society that we are currently in, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not. That is where we are all gathering our early experiences, and we have to stop and recognize, hey, again, when my therapist was like going through and saying, examine why you do the things that you do, why you have the thoughts that you have. Like, if I am looking at this person and assuming their experiences because of how they look, or maybe who they're holding hands with, or whatever the case may be, what I perceive of them, I need to step back and be like, you know what? Maybe I don't automatically know this person. Why am I assuming these things? Is it because I can visually see evidence of these things specifically? Or is it because society has told me that this equals this, which is not necessarily the case? We don't all have the same experiences, and you can't really assume what experiences someone has just seeing them on the internet, or walking down the street, or meeting them in the grocery store, standing behind them in line. You don't know where they were before they came to where you're meeting. So I think that's the biggest one, is just examining why we think the things about people that we see, and really taking a good hard look at ourselves, and trying to deconstruct these ideas of what people are supposed to like, or what they're supposed to be doing with their lives, because everyone's different. Everyone is so different from each other. As you can see, all of us on screen we all have these two things in common, but we are all very, very different people, and that's beautiful and great, and more people need to accept it and embrace it, because that is what makes this world beautiful. It really is.
I completely agree, Eris. Actually, when you were speaking about that, a line one of my psych professors used to say, before every class, to kind of remind each other of this, was, everyone is a mosaic of their experiences, their thoughts, and their feelings, and no two mosaics are going to be the same. You are completely correct. Yes, we have a lot of similarities and threads and coffee that is firing off, but we also have a lot of experiences that are vastly different. And I think it's been really fun to see all of us having that respect to listen to each other's experiences, to be educated on that. Because I think that circles back to Rue's point about giving that education to help fix those problems and those shortcomings. So I greatly appreciate you, Eris, for speaking to that. I'm going to jump over to Josephine because I'm curious what, Josephine, you are thinking about all of this.
Yeah. So the full question, could I get the full question again?
Sure. So, what are some of the problems we face being neurodivergent and asexual, and how can they be fixed?
Yeah. So I think to actually start off, or put more direction to some fixes. Some personal fixes for anyone that is at the level of like, okay, I am like present enough in however many ways that I want to be able to help and like decolonize and like dissect my own mind. Rather than a structural one, you also have to get as uncomfortable as we have and dissect your stuff too. Just as there, I guess, to use kind of an example of something that we can tangibly see and experience. There are socially acceptable and accommodated disabilities, as well as socially acceptable and accommodated hyperfixations, namely glasses and sports. And there are also some questions that you can go on a long, personal journey on misogyny alone. For example, if you are a masculine person, why are you less impatient when it comes to other masc people, but more impatient with feminine people? Why do you only listen to music by men? Why do you actually hate K-pop? Stuff like that. Don't get defensive, or rather than just, emotions and feelings happen, and when you are at that height of defensiveness or at that height of impatience or whatever, that's a great moment to be like, okay, I'm here, why? And that takes a lot of time with yourself, as well as it can take therapy, or it can take just it could take the whole pandemic was a really great opportunity to just finally sit down when everyone is really trying to think about how to take care of yourself more or take care of others more. But yeah, it's a lot of self dissection, and be cringe, be free.
Definitely agree with you, Josephine, when it comes to that. And I think maybe this is just my interpretation, but it feels like people are becoming more comfortable with speaking that out. I mean, I've seen several ACE panels in the last year alone, having that conversation. And there's been a number of also organizations that have stepped forward to help kind of voice and change the stigma around mental health and being an advocate for yourself when it comes to that. So yeah, don't be afraid to kind of do that, but also, we talk about a community. You have to have that kind of a whether it's one friend or multiple, having some kind of resource to fall back and to have that support to remind you that your feelings are valid, your experiences are valid, you are not overreacting, all of those things. So I very much appreciate that, Josephine. I'm going to jump over to Syrup now.
Alrighty. So problems we face, being neurodivergent, asexual, and how can they be fixed, right?
Yes.
So I'll talk a little bit more in the specifics for my personal experience, because I, first of all, of course, agree with everything that's been said so far, and I know it's also been very top down kind of view of like this is a very big topic, this is a very big society thing. So there's also a lot of little things that can be done. So obviously at its core, it is a normalization of every little day things, and the big things and the small things and the things you may not realize, and the sharing. But one of the things that Nala said earlier that was like, oh my god, I had I not mentioned that, emotional regulation. I had no idea. And it's a little bit complicated because I actually come from a pretty nerdy family. I'm very lucky. My dad played D&D before it was D&D, when he was doing his PhD. And in that regard, I'm lucky to have a household that I've come from, a household that was always very I'm gonna say neurodivergent. But it wasn't addressed or talked about as neurodivergent because that wasn't the language that was had at the time. And so I was gonna say I'm very good at invalidating myself in that regard. And I was gonna say that, and I'm gonna change it a little bit to make it to spin into a positive in terms of how we can fix these things. Our life experiences tend to be very invalidating. Whether it's from others or from ourselves. So all of the grace that you have available to give, don't forget to give that to yourself as well. Um, I genuinely thought so. Like I said, I'm Middle Eastern, I'm Israeli. It is me being emotional, me having issues with like every little thing. There's something wrong with me in that regard, and I internalized that because you just got to deal. You just got to deal. You just got to deal. That was like ingrained in me. Um, and having that space and watching the TikToks and realizing you're not alone, all of those things help normalize things. And the little things that blew my mind were like, oh my God, I don't have to arrange my fridge like everybody else arranges their fridge. What? Tips and tricks, those little things that are neurodivergent friendly. I love it so much. My condiments are now in a drawer. My vegetables are where I can see them, and it is a life game changer, y'all. So hey, if you have more of those tricks, please tag me on Twitter because I want to learn all of them. I want to neurodivergify my house. Please. You want to go ahead, Nala?
Oh, just super quick. There is a book written by, I cannot remember her name, but it's a how to clean for people for ADHD folks. It's a book about how to clean your house. And then there's also someone on YouTube that I've watched videos from about how to organize your house for neurodivergent
I
folks.
know exactly which one you're talking about.
If
Yes.
my DMs are open, I will take them all. I'm gonna find them. Let's go. But honestly, I love that joy that comes from sharing that from my friends, for my friends, and everything. But there's just so much of every little step along the way of realizing that you can find and make your life the way that works for you, that works best for you, and that's a ever learning process. So share those all over the place, normalize them, talk about them. That's super, super helpful. And then I'm going to do my very, very best to say this spicy hot take in a way that doesn't offend anybody, which, it's difficult. So, okay, so I am a firm believer, and it's part of my faith as well, of starting with kindness. There is something very beautiful about this lovely space that we have built for ourselves in the TTRPG community, at least the one that I find myself in, where we are able to talk a lot about our neurodivergencies, where we are able to normalize it. It's important to remember that not every community and every environment is like that. And you might be living in a space where so much is normalized for you, and then you make a left turn, and maybe it's your workplace, maybe it's other groups, wherever you find yourself, that is not as accepting. It's very easy. And okay, this is where it's very hard for me to like make sure I'm saying this correctly. It is understandable to get upset, and your emotions and your feelings are valid. And it takes spoons to choose that grace and that love for people that may not have that for you. But I genuinely believe that that's how you change the world, with that grace and with that love. So like, whether you want to say like choose love or whatever you want to say, take care of yourself. Please take care of yourself. But also remember that everyone's experiences and everyone's environments are not necessarily the way that you find yourself or the way you have built your own life. There is a quote that I love forever, from Rabbi Hillel. I'm gonna say it in Hebrew and then I will say it in English just because it's one of my absolute favorite quotes. Im ein ani li, mili, וכשאני לעצמי, מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, אימתי. What that means is, if I am not for me, who will be for me? And when I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when?
first, but that was really pretty. That was really pretty. I don't necessarily think that that is a hot take, Syrup. I think it's a good reminder for a lot of our spaces because with these online communities and there's a whole other topic about parasocial relationships and things like that. Each community is very different. Your experiences are going to be very different in those spaces as well. And there are going to be people that genuinely want to learn. There's of course going to be trolls and people that are already have their preconceived notions about how they see the world. I think reminding each other the grace of patience and setting those boundaries is incredibly important. Got it. Thank you, Robo.
It's more difficult in the social media space of hot. I laughed that I called my
Yeah.
own hot take, but like it kind of is in the social media space because everything, only the hot takes get shown around and shared around.
It's
Yeah.
funny. The Twitter disease is you can say hot take and then say a statement that everybody agrees with, and it will go viral. You just have to put the
Right.
words hot take before it, and
It-
then people will start discourse over absolutely nothing. People can be like, hot take, I think trans people are valid. Bam, viral. There
Yeah.
you go. You now have 20,000 followers. Congratulations.
And actually, Jay, and I do realize too, we are gonna have to speed it up a little bit. I know we've there's so much about this topic, y'all. Seriously, we need a part two, because there's just so much.
I wrote my notes. I'm ready.
All right, Jay, rapid fire. I
All
will.
right.
Do you need the question again?
No, I do not need the question again.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm ready. So basically, apologies in advance. I'm gonna get on a little soapbox here. It's not because I'm 5 feet tall. It is, anyway. I want to talk for a moment about capitalism because it is. I don't know how to say this other than capitalism is the core root problem of ableism, because to be able bodied is to be able to produce and work in this society that in order to live, you need money. In order to get money, you need to work. And everyone who can't produce for our society is disabled. And that's the root cause of it. Like there's so much infighting in the space about, this, that, and what have you. And I think people forget that the core root of our problem as far as ableism goes towards our neurodivergencies or other assorted disabilities is capitalism. And that's just it. But also in general, society, specifically American society, which I'm speaking about specifically to America, because culture in non-US countries, especially in the global South and in Asia and Africa, it's different there. So I'm specifically speaking to America. But American society is a white, cisgender, heterosexual, Christian patriarchy. And everyone, literally everyone, despite everyone except indigenous people, are immigrants here. But American culture demands assimilation, and everyone who doesn't fit that norm set by these white supremacist colonists who, lest you forget, traversed the Atlantic for religious freedom from England, are shunned and ostracized. And that really sucks. It really does. And it's hard not to get mad at that, right? Like, I am not an angry person. I don't get mad. But then sometimes I sit here and I start thinking too long and too hard about how who I am as a person is not supported in the country that I live in the country that claims to be for freedom for all, a country that was founded on religious freedom, and yet Christianity is the only one that is supported by our laws, by the systems of everything, right? And it's really hard not to feel powerless, especially now with all of this anti-trans rhetoric that's happening because of, well, and even with like Roe v. Wade being repealed over the summer and like all of these other things, like how are you not angry? And it's hard to not feel powerless in this because I am one person. What can I do? Right? But I think the internet, just sitting here with you people from all over, from all experiences, the internet gives us connection to one another. It gives us community. And in finding this community, we can empower ourselves and each other to make small but intentional and radical change within our own spaces. And it might not feel like you're doing a lot, but in making this space for yourself and for your people and to be an active ally to other marginalized people, you will make a change, even if in one person's life. That's change in one person's life. And so that's, I guess what I'm saying is, like, even now, like when we're talking about something as simple as showing allyship to trans people are telling you don't play this game. Jewish people are saying don't play this game. People of color are saying don't fucking play this game. I said the one F-bomb.
Yeah, we were allowed one.
Well deserved.
A well one, a good
That
one.
was well deserved.
Don't play this game, right? Easy, simple. And yet people are out here like, oh, but I really want to play this game. Like they're coming up with literally every excuse. And it's like, okay, you could just not. Is this game life or death for you? Because the anti-trans rhetoric is life or death for some people. And you cannot, like, I don't care if you play the game. I don't care. I can't care, because if I start caring, then I get angry. This is why I haven't talked about this on Twitter. I have not talked about the game on Twitter because I will get angry. But I could not care less if you play this game, but you cannot play this game and then claim to be an ally.
Yep.
Because you are not the person who decides if you're an ally or not. The community that you claim to support are the ones who decide if you're an ally. And ally is not a noun, it's an adjective, it's an active term. You have to actively be showing allyship to be an ally.
Yep.
And I'm gonna step off my soapbox now.
I
like this
thank
this
you.
this gets me riled up, because it's really hard, I think, when people are looking for something to blame all of our problems on. We look at each other and then we fight in our communities. I'm so tired of queer discourse.
Yep.
I'm so tired of queer discourse, because a lot of it is started by white queer people. And so I'm so tired of it. And I'm like, I don't care about he, him, lesbians. I don't care about bi versus pan. Like, call yourself what you want to call yourself. We're all queer. We're all beautiful people. And the way that you experience your own sexuality is for you to define for yourself. And I don't think, like, I'm soapboxing, but I just, it's so infuriating seeing people fight with each other instead of like taking that energy and using it to actually make change in the places where change actually might do something better, instead of fighting on the internet and, you know, getting brownie points for dunking on the next racist who pops up out of nowhere. Husband, father, gamer, being mean to everyone. Oh, let's get dunks on him. Like,
there is so much that will drain our mental spoons.
Yep.
Let's
save your spoons,
conserve them, please.
Save your brain cells for stuff that matters.
First off, thank you. I think you are vocalizing what many of us have been feeling. But it's also one of those things of, okay, do I have the spoons to actually go onto Twitter and talk about this? Because you're going to get that discourse. We've been seeing it already, especially in regards to a certain game. And I agree with you completely. One thing that was jumping in, I think it actually segues to our last question, which we are going to do rapid fire. Thank you, Robo, for producing and being amazing. Is what it is to be an ally, because especially even with regards to this game, but also with so many of the different charity events, whether it be signal boosting, marginalized and other communities in this space, what it means to be an ally, because so often we see those cases of, or even recently playing that game, but then they're raising money for a certain other organization or something. Yes, Jay.
This is so funny. And I say funny just ironically. I don't,
Sure.
It's not haha funny. I have a thread that I wrote a long time ago about allyship and about what allyship is. And I will post it in
Please.
our Zoom chat. Please, it's really long, but I promise you it's worth it. And I wrote it a long time ago, but I still stand by everything that I said in here
No,
because go read the thread. That'll be
Thank
the
you.
extended reading for what we're gonna say today.
It's your reading homework.
But everything that I would want to say to answer this question is in that thread there.
No, I appreciate that. And I've already bookmarked it because I will be reading it. I think too, when it comes to whether it's neurodivergency, asexuality, trans rights, stop AAPI hate, all of those things, we need to live that 365 days a year, not during certain months, not during specific causes or when something happens. It should not be a reaction. This should be something that is without thought. So I do appreciate that discourse at Jay, and I know Rue, you wanted to hop in on that as well, but I think all of us connected on that. I think that also segues into our final topic for today, and I'm also going to ask you all to do outros as we go as well because we are a little short on time. But how can communities better support you, whether this is in regards to TTRPGs, video games, or panels, just chatting, things like this? I am, because I scroll, I am going to jump over to, oh no, I lost my spot. Josephine, and if you wouldn't mind also adding on to that where we can find and support all the wonderful things you are doing.
Yeah. So how can communities better support you? If your community or server is not already in the know about tone indicators, or anything along the lines that create a community where clarifying is not considered over clarification, is not considered a negative thing in order to have an organic conversation. If all parties are able to understand each other at the end of the day, that should be your outcome. So if that's not already the language or the space for that, embed tone indicators in your server or community rules like a syllabus or a curriculum. If you find yourself in a situation of people fighting due to tone for whatever needless reason, that's an automatic fix for a moderator to get down to any problem. So that's like an immediate in-community in-house thing that you can definitely do. I am the storyteller for E2M by Night, which is going to have its finale this Tuesday over at Going Crit RPG, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm also going to be in a lot of Bad House RPG, either admin or in the projects themselves. Coming up in March, we have a Vampire the Masquerade game, Toronto by Night, specifically run by Aki from Akinomi_art or Goblets and Gaze, and lots of other projects out in the wild. I am at Scary Dog Friend, and thank you so much, everyone, for being on this panel with me.
Thank you so much, Josephine. I really enjoyed your information that you gave us about your experiences, but also just your perspective about it. It was so refreshing, and just thank you so much. Let's jump over to Rue.
Hello. I think in terms of ways to make your community more welcoming to neurodivergent and ace folks, this is more specifically geared towards tabletop RPG streaming communities. Is sort of keeping in mind that accommodations can conflict. Like you should never punish someone for if they're having a bad physical or mental health day, having to pull back from a stream. And like I've seen a lot of channels where in the rules it's like if you call out the day of the stream, we won't cast you again. And disabled folks and neurodivergent folks and like folks with any sort of marginalization can't determine in advance if we're going to have a bad pain day or a bad brain day. And so, sort of removing that sort of language from your rules tells neurodivergent folks that if they're having a brain foggy day, it's safe to come to you and say, hey, I can't play to the best of my ability today, or I can't be here today and in a meaningful way. And also, from the opposite end, and the accommodations can conflict, trying to give your neurodivergent players as much forewarning about things as possible. If you know that there's going to be a change in the schedule, if you know that there's going to be a change in what's happening during a stream, giving as much notification as possible, because when sudden changes happen, a lot of us can't handle that in the way that a neurotypical person can. And so trying to be as transparent about what's happening as possible, and also as understanding as possible when someone can't make a commitment they might have previously thought they would be able to do. And so those are my biggest tips for folks, especially those running streams or podcasts or any sort of like professional work in the tabletop space, because one of the worst things that happens to a lot of us is that we get called unprofessional for things that we can't help. So rather than, like Jay was saying, valuing us based on the capitalistic value you can get for our presence, value us based on who we are as people. And I am Rue. You can find me on the internet on Twitter as at Ilana Knight 13 and everywhere else as just Ilana Knight. And I am a tabletop performer. You can actually find me. Joe was talking about Bad House on Mondays. I am in our Visigoths versus Molgoths campaign on Bad House RPG. And you can also find me alternating Sundays and Tuesdays of the same like week. The Tuesdays and the Sundays are in the same week time, on Huntsman's Hydra in a Blades in the Dark and a Vaesen campaign, respectively. And other than that, I'm a game designer, I'm a sensitivity consultant, and you can catch up with me on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Rue. Great to finally meet and talk with you a bit more too. So thank you so much. Let's jump over to Syrup.
Hi. So I'm immediately trying to find the question again.
Oh, the question is, how can communities better support you, whether this is in regards to TTRPGs, video games, or chatting, when it comes to that?
Okay, heavy hitter first, then quick hitters after that. Do your research. For love of everything that you care about, do your research. Please. And do your part to stop the spread of misinformation. Read the articles that you're sharing, look at different sides of every argument. I don't care what side. I really don't care what the argument is. Look at both sides. You will be a better person for it. Just do it. Do your research. Be in depth. Stop the hot takes. All of those things.
Hot takes. Stop hot takes.
Hot takes. Stop hot takes. Absolutely. As an individual who no, I don't want to get too heavy into it. It just I'm Middle Eastern, but I have a lot of family in Israel. And a prior year, when a lot of shit went down, I cannot tell you how painful it was for me to be in this community. It sucks, and misinformation can be rampant on both sides. So just keep that in mind. Okay, that was the heavy stuff. Normalize safety tools, please. Specifically in TTRPGs is what I'm referring to. Normalize checking in. Do your vibe checks before. Do it in your home games too. Whether you're streaming it or not, just do the vibe checks. It's so nice. And ask people if they're low on the 1 through 10 number check-in. Be like, hey, what do you want to be pulled into scenes? Do you want to just chill for yourself, just kind of enjoy the environment? Cool. Communicate. It's wonderful. And normalize giving me like written stuff, because audio processing, please let me just read things while you talk. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Oh, no, that's not it. Who am I? I forgot. That's a thing.
I love you.
I was like, I'm done. I am not done. Y'all, I am Syrup of Waffles Maple Syrup. If you have not heard of Waffles Maple Syrup, I have a SNSH problem. Anyways, our mission is to showcase and unite underrepresented voices through high-quality productions and the magic of collaborative storytelling. We are so incredibly passionate about what we do. I GM for our Pathfinder 2E show Outcast and Outclass, which is bi-weekly Thursdays. And we have such an amazing cast. I love them all so very, very much. We're doing some really cool stuff, so please continue to check out what is upcoming for us. And then as well, bi-weekly Tuesdays, from the mind of my wonderful partner Waffles, we have a Delta Green campaign currently called Reflections. And you can find me personally at Revica_syrup on the social medias. That is all. This has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Let's jump over to Jay.
Hi everybody. I have two more nuggets of wisdom to share with you all. The first thing is from the perspective of myself as an art director, but this applies to literally anyone doing project management or running literally anything. If you plan extensions and grace periods into the timeline of your project, when people who are disabled need extensions or call out or for whatever thing, whatever, if you plan for that, then your timeline won't get messed up. And you know, if people keep on needing extensions and then it starts eating away even into the planned extension periods, like that's just life. But if you plan for like an extra week or 2 weeks for that deadline to be like, okay, if I need all the art in by this date, then I will tell everyone I need the art by this date, and then we start earlier. And that will just lead to happier people, because then if everyone gets their art in on time for the deadline, you know, whatever, then everybody else has extra time and it's great. And then I also will just very nicely ask project managers, just, this is a rhetorical question, but why does your thing need to come out at the time that you've specified it needs to come out? Because I always think waiting longer and not sacrificing the mental health of literally everybody you've hired to work on your thing, waiting longer for a good product is better than burnt out freelancers. So think about that. But then on the side of actual play performance, because that is something I do professionally, yeah, don't do crunch. Crunch bad. Never do crunch. Nobody produces well in crunch too anyway. Like you're not, anyway. From the side of actual play performance, if you are looking to hire me or literally anyone for a show, I get a lot of show pitches in my like DMs, which you're free to invite me to your shows. I'm interested, especially if it's paid. But I always ask the same questions. I find myself asking these same questions every single time. And I'm giving these to you all. These are the questions I ask everyone. Because normally this information is not given. But who else is playing? Tell me who the other people that are going to be involved. Tell me who your producer is. Tell me what channel it's going to be on. Because as a multiple marginalized person, I have people I simply won't share a table with for whatever reason. I have my blacklist. And if you don't tell me who's on your show, I'm going to be worried that someone on my blacklist is cast. And so if you tell me up front, I can kindly and quietly say, no, thanks. But tell me, two, what's the time commitment? How long are we going to play for? Is it every week, bi-weekly? How many sessions are we playing? You know, this is like very simple stuff, but like, tell me, what game are we playing? What genre and what themes? What's the plot hook going to be? I cannot tell you how many times people have been like, hey, do you want to play D&D with me? And I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? D&D is not a genre. Is it horror? Is it like a space romp? Is it like, is it comedy? Like, you know? So tell me these things, because for example, I don't really do horror games. So if it's going to be dark and gritty and like super hyper realistic, like that's not the game for me. So tell me that. Number 4, is this a paid opportunity? Tell, if it's paid, say so. If it's unpaid, say so that people can make informed decisions about what projects they want to be a part of. And lastly, and most importantly, this is the one I'm going to tell you all to ask people, is why do you think I am a good fit for your table? And what about my performance do you like? And if they can't say anything specific about your performance skills, then it's very likely they've never seen you in a thing before, and they just want you for, you know, being a marginalized person, or, you know, you have a lot of followers and you're like, oh, I want this person for clout or whatever. And like, that's like fine. If you want to play with me because I have a platform, sure. But like, it just feels icky, you know what? Like, because like, I don't want to be a token. I want to be on your show because I'm a good performer and you like what I bring to the table. Not because I am a queer, trans, non-binary person of color who's disabled, right? Because I can be all of those things and a good performer. And that's why I want to be cast in things, because I'm good, not because of what I happen to be. You know what I mean? So tell me all of these things up front when you approach somebody in the DMs. Just like give us all the information so that we can make a decision and we're not like asking questions. But that's me. Hi everyone, my name is Nala or Jay. I use they them pronouns. I'm on the internet at Nala Wu. Like I said, illustrator, art director. I do lots of things, actual play, stream, performance. Come watch Itaewon by Night. Our finale is next Tuesday on Valentine's Day. We are the first and only all Asian cast playing Vampire the Masquerade, which is a historically very white game. So come support us. We're great. And all of the VODs are on YouTube, so you can catch up on that show. But that's like the main thing I want to plug. Also, All the Witches, if you haven't checked that out, it is a game written by a trans person featuring witches. So if you don't want to play, that other game, come support us on Kickstarter. We're launching very soon. And you can follow All the Witches with an underscore on Twitter for more information. But yeah, that's me. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening. And community things, yay. Next person, talk.
I was muted. It had to happen once. Thank you so much, Jay. Eris.
Hi, I'm Eris Savad. My pronouns are she, her. I think the biggest thing I'm going to say that hasn't been touched on, which really everything everyone said is really great. I have no disagreements here. Is I'm going to say bring in captions and written things even for your home games if you're digital. Because I play so many games online. I play most of my games online. I play all of my games online. And man, I have a hard time remembering sometimes the words that you say, they register and they stick and I start to form a response and then they're gone. So if you have like a monologue or some cool scene you want to make sure your table knows about, write it down, pass it out, give it as a handout, because I want to keep that super awesome dream sequence that you sent the whole party through. I want to be able to remember that later because my character is going to remember that later because it was a big thing for them. That was like a life-changing experience. I want to remember that, and I'm not gonna unless you write it down. Because I you know what, someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Jay, that you have to sit in the front of the class,
Yep,
so
that
you
was me.
can watch your
lips.
professor's lips, but you can't break that concentration in order to write your notes, so they're gonna have to go through it again. I got you. So yeah, just have those important things written down because they're really really precious, and the people who are listening to them and having these experiences with you want to remember that, and they might be too into the moment to actually write any of the hints down that you're giving them. So yeah, write things down. It's great. Yeah, and I stream things and I make things. You can find me talking crap with Nomadic Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays on twitch.tv/Nomadic, where we have Gnome Brew. It's about an hour in the morning where we wake up and have a cup of something and just talk about whatever pops up. We currently have a book club going, so go check that out and read Children of Blood and Bone because it's delightful. Yeah, I also have a pre-order going because I make dice bags and trays and all sorts of jewelry and stuff. You can find the things that I make at erisavad.com, and you can find me on the internet at Stitched by Eris. And I think that's it. I think that's me.
Awesome.
You
Thank
should
you,
buy
Eris.
stuff from Eris's shop because
You
it's
should.
cool.
It's
I
really
have
pretty.
things from Eris's shop.
I have a
things in my
vampire
cart.
necklace from Eris's shop.
Yeah, I have things
Stop
sitting in
it.
my cart that I'm gonna give myself for my birthday. Hi everybody. So I also I resonate with what everyone's been saying in terms of how can the community better support you. I think communication, we've said that. Safety tools and session zeros are not a one-time thing. Those should be every time things. I also agree with accessibility. Check with your players and people about, hey, do they want to listen to music during the session, especially the music you're playing? Maybe that's too much for them because, hey, that's an extra stimulus and they want to focus on what's happening in the scene. And just being open, listen, have that kind of conversation and be open to it. Don't get defensive about it. And something that we use in our D&D game is give yourself a spirit point. Give yourself something each day that you are choosing to do that makes you happy, whether that's crocheting, knitting, drawing, or dancing around the room, or chasing around your black cat that wants to be a diva. So do that. I am D&D Jordan Lee. I have been the moderator for this panel. How did that happen? And I am the DM for Ampistrano D&D, which is an all ace D&D homebrew, heavily homebrewed 5e game. I'm also a Take This ambassador. I also stream on my channel. We do a lot of Dead by Daylight and also playing story games. And also we do charity streaming. We do Games for Change 3 times a year and raise money for a number of different causes. In the last 2 years, we've raised over $22,000 for Color of Change and Stop AAPI Hate, because we should be focusing on all of these organizations year round, not just during specific months. I do want to say a very quick thank you to RoboGoblin, who has been the oracle behind the scenes and making sure our neurodiversity doesn't make us go completely overtime, which we have, it's fine, and for putting this con together. But this is just one of the panels that is happening this weekend. There is still so much happening. You can tune in tomorrow, Saturday, February 11th at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Asexuality Matters. This panel is going to be having some fantastic creators talking. We have April Raygun, Chaotic Darby, the Healer DM, Dark Lord Canada, a Disaster Queer, and it's being moderated by Red Mage Ray. Again, thank you so much to our panelists, and I'm going to say it one more time. We have all been discussing our own experiences, journeys, and identities with regard to being asexual and neurodivergent. None of us here are psychologists or therapists, so please make sure to use the proper resources if you have specific questions in regards to those experiences. What may be true for us may not be true for you in your story. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for your questions. We are going to go ahead and raid over into Fawn and Games, who is live now raising money for the Trans Justice Funding Project. It looks like they are playing some kind of retro game, so we'll be heading out. Thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.